Okay, so in the last half an hour or so, we have reached quite a few significant milestones, all in rapid succession. We have reached the exact halfway point of Victorious in terms of total number of episodes. We have reached the exact halfway point of Victorious in terms of number of seasons. And we have successfully exited from the mainstream NSU Prime. So we can now voyage into Victorious media of different shapes and sizes. As per usual, we're going to take this moment to have our mid-season intermission. And I've picked the topic already. And when you guys see what we're going to be talking about, I think you're going to be really excited. But first, I want to take an intermission from our intermission. I want to take a break so breaky that we just stop talking about Victorious at all for a few minutes. Firstly, I want to talk about a big issue with this miniseries as a whole. And then I want to talk about Garfield for like a good few minutes. Just gotta talk about Garfield for a bit because I want to. And then I'm gonna use that to get back on track to Victorious. It's all gonna loop back around. In theory, to be honest, I don't give a shit. I just want to talk about Garfield. Think about it this way. I've been working on this miniseries now for 10 months. That has been 10 months of me standing in a room talking about Nickelodeon sitcoms. And I wanna talk about some stuff that's been on my mind. And I also wanna kind of reach out and see if you guys can help me with a couple personal searches that I have been doing. So in between finishing season 1 of Victorious and season 2, I decided to take a little bit of an elongated break to instead work on finishing the video that I arguably should have been working on the whole time, which is iCarly Part 2, aka the end of iCarly, aka the video that came out before this one. So I took some time off from this video, finished that video obviously, and worked really hard on it, was really happy with the results, was really happy with what my editors could pull together, and it was a lot of work to turn around in the time we did, as per it usually is, and I got it posted it to YouTube, decided to take a few days off, went to visit my family, we went out to dinner, and then it was gone, and the video no longer existed, because while I was out at dinner, Viacom decided to take it down. And so that video just stopped existing, and it was really difficult for me, not only because I had put so much work in, but because I also knew that people were segmenting that video. They weren't watching it in one go. So I knew that there were all these people who were enjoying the video, but now couldn't finish it. And the weird thing about it is that it was a manual claim. So it wasn't an automatic claim. It's not like it took 2 days for an automatic claim to go through. It was a manual claim. So someone went to that video on purpose and took that video down, which was weird to me because I was like, why would you take down iCarly Part 2 but leave up iCarly Part 1? And obviously, the obvious conclusion a lot of people had was because iCarly Part 1 is heavily nostalgic in how I present it, and iCarly Part 2 is heavily negative because the end of the last few seasons of iCarly are bad. I don't know if that's actually the case, but it was just really confusing to me. Like, why would you take down one of my videos about this topic, but not the other one? That doesn't make sense to me. But what a lot of people didn't realize when that video got taken down is that there were still 2 places that you could have watched it, even though the video was supposedly blocked. And the first place was my Patreon, because I had a test edit on my Patreon that was 100% done, but was unlisted on a different channel. And I posted on my Patreon so people could see it early. And I guess the logic is that Viacom didn't want to pay me money to go to my Patreon to find the link to block the video. So that video never got taken down. And so that whole time that video was gone, you could have just gone to my Patreon and watched it there. And the second place is Canada. I don't know why this is, but when Viacom blocked that video, they decided, hey, we're going to leave it up in Canada. Because those Canadians seem like cool people, aside from, all the genocide and everything. So we're going to let them watch iCarly Part 2, but no one else in the world can watch this video. Only Canadians. So this is a real quick reminder. This video is sponsored by NordVPN. During that whole ordeal, if you had NordVPN, you could have just set yourself to a Canadian server, tell the internet you're Canadian, the internet would believe you, and then you refresh the page, and my video would have been back up, because again, for some odd reason, only Canadians are allowed to watch my videos. Once again, my link is nordvpn.com/QUINTON. The reason I'm going on this tirade is to say, in the very realistic situation that this video, or any video that I'm working on right now, gets taken down after I post it, the first thing you should do is go to my Twitter, see what I've posted there, see where the video is blocked. If the video isn't blocked in some specific country like Canada or Norway or whatever, then you just use a VPN, set yourself to that country, refresh the page, and you can continue watching the video. But if it's blocked worldwide, then I probably have an edit on my Patreon, which has not been affected by a manual claim, and you can just subscribe to me on Patreon, give me $1 or $2, and get to watch the video regardless of what anyone has to say about it. I'm very lucky that within like a 72-hour period, I managed to get the video back. Even though it set it back, I got the video back, and I credit that entirely to you guys just bothering Viacom. Because as I've always said, bullying works. And so I just wanted to put this little side tangent in the video so we're all on the same page about realistic ways to get around copyright takedowns. Anyways, I'm going to talk about Garfield now. So in my last video, I previewed a brand new Patreon goal, which I hadn't really publicly shouted out before, which was that if we hit a certain number of Patreon supporters, I would do a video reviewing every single Garfield video game ever released, of which I think my tally is now at about 140 or so. Now, I set that Patreon goal really, really high because I thought it would take us like a year to reach it, but within 3 or 4 days of me posting that video, we skyrocketed past that goal. And obviously it was entirely because my video got taken down and Patreon was a great way to watch my video, but nevertheless, we reached the goal that I was considering like one of my final Patreon goals ever within like 48 hours. And you know, I want to encourage you guys to go down and support me on Patreon, but I can't keep making these new subscriber promises and these new Patreon promises of I'm going to make this video and that video and this video when I'm still right now working on the original sin, the first promise that I made. So instead, I have added 2 new Patreon stretch goals, which are dedicated not to videos on the main channel, but potential videos I want to do for the second channel. For those of you who don't know, I have a second channel. It is called Quentin Re2s. Yes, that is the best one I could think of. I think it's pretty good. And I like to post behind the scenes stuff, little goofs, and I'm trying to use it more often now. But the idea is my next 2 Patreon goals are 4 videos that I would theoretically post to Quentin Re2s. So the first goal is a video reviewing every single Heathcliff video game. Pretty basic. The idea is on the same day I would drop the Garfield video games video on the main channel, we'd get the Heathcliff mini video on the second channel. You know, pretty basic, not a goal that's not that far away from where we are right now. But the second goal, which is the one that really excites me, is that if we reach 3,000 patrons, I will make a video chronicling and reviewing Garfield knockoff merchandise. That is Garfield merchandise specifically made without the knowledge of Paws Incorporated and without the permission of Jim Davis. Those of you who follow me on Twitter know that this has been kind of a recent hyper obsession of mine. I've basically been going through and trying to chronicle as much information as I can about this completely, unresearched topic and trying to save all the info I can and even going out of my way to try and buy quite a few pieces of Garfield knockoff merchandise and memorabilia. But what I've discovered is that in some cases, Garfield knockoff merchandise is harder to find than official Garfield merchandise because official Garfield merchandise is mass produced. It's shipped all around the world. You can find it, at your local Goodwill. But knockoff Garfield merchandise, typically produced for a short window of time under the hopes of not getting caught, sold on specific shady websites, often without shipping to the United States. And the really cool, interesting stuff has a listing, but will be sold out by the time you find it. Some of the absolute highlights in the category of Garfield knockoff merchandise that I want to own but I can't find anywhere include this Indonesian plushie, which is very clearly the cat from Bob the Builder, but with Garfield's face stapled onto the front. This Chinese Garfield plushie, which is not shaped like Garfield or indeed any cat in the slightest, but very clearly has all of Garfield's characteristics filled into the spaces. And finally, my personal favorite, this Chinese Garfield dressed like Spider-Man. I call him Andrew, and there are a good 10 other funny jokes I can make about that if I can find this fucking thing. So I thought I'd do a little public service announcement, not only to announce, that you guys should support me on Patreon to help pay for my editors and support this miniseries and this and this and that, but to also kind of say, hey, what you bitches got? One of y'all motherfuckers has the Bob the Builder Garfield knockoff plush, and you don't use it, and you're like, I was gonna sell it, but now you know what to do with it. Basically, if you have a Garfield plush that you think might be a knockoff, or that you just think, is kind of neat, I recommend emailing me at contactquintonreviews@gmail.com. And before any of you guys ask, hey Quinton, have you seen the one on Amazon that's a big meme that's all ugly? Yes, of course I have. I've bought 4. I dressed this one up in the iCarly Build-A-Bear outfit. Do you want to know why I've done that? The only way you're going to find out is if you go down to Patreon and you pledge $1 and you help me reach this goal. This thing really is kind of gross. So some of you probably think that I'm going to be done talking about Garfield now. You are probably new here. As we discussed in the last video, I set up the Patreon goal that if we reach that magic number, I was going to start working on a video dedicated to reviewing Garfield video games. And the first thing I have done since the moment we reached that goal is I have started going out and buying Garfield video games to have physical copies of. So this is my Garfield video game shelf. This is all the Garfield video games which have arrived so far. There are a few more coming in the mail. I had to import a few. Now, as you can probably tell, I've actually run out of room. So I have a bunch more games that are supposed to go here at the start, but the shelf is completely full. So the funny thing is, up on this shelf, I got all these different Garfield games from, 20, 30 years of history. And then down here, I just got the Garfield kart games. And then over on this side is Warfield. Now, some of you will probably question why I need a physical copy of games that can famously very easily be emulated. And the answer is that I find, as a videographer, that having a physical prop to show the camera does so much in telling the story in the proper way. I personally think that being able to hold this up and say this is the first Garfield video game that was ever released, I think that says a lot more than just showing you a screenshot on archive.org. I mean, this little disc tells so much of a story. Just holding this up, you can start talking about the video game crash of 1983 and how that stopped Garfield from reaching home console, and how that crash was partially caused by the sudden innovation of relatively cheap home computers which were competing with consoles, which is why the first Garfield video game came out on a home computer. Just stuff like that. And so my goal has now become to own a physical copy of every single Garfield video game ever released in physical form. And I am very happy to say that including all the games on my shelf and all the games that are coming to me through the mail, I now have only 3 games which I cannot find. The first is a 1989 video game called Garfield Trivia Game, which was an Apple II game, I believe, that was released again on a floppy disk, and I believe it was a mail order, and thus it's really, really rare. The second is Garfield Labyrinth, which is really infamous because it's a retool of a Mickey Mouse game from Japan that was also released as Ghostbusters 2 in America, and was also an unlicensed knockoff of a PC game? The point is that the Garfield version of this game was released only in Europe, and so far finding a copy with the box intact has proved to be entirely impossible. And the final game that I'm looking for is actually one that I already own, and that is the famous and the infamous Garfield and Sonic pack. I almost dropped it there. That would have been scary. This was sent to me by a fan, and so far it is easily the coolest thing that a fan has sent to me. Because this is obviously an incredibly famous game. I see this reposted all the time. People don't think that the Garfield and the Sonic and Garfield pack is real. It's entirely real. It was a PC release that Sega did in 1999 to kind of repackage a bunch of their games together. And it's become really infamous for this surreal cover, which is absolutely beautiful. So if I already have it, why am I mentioning that I'm looking for it? The answer is that with a lot of video games that have cardboard box releases, you know, you get the game, you just throw out the cardboard box. And so all that I have is the game in a jewel case. There was no slipcover, and I don't have the box. And while I love that I have this, I would really, really love to have a copy with that famous box art, you know, included. And one of the main reasons I think about this all the time is this is on my shelf, but because it doesn't have a cover from the side, it looks like this is nothing. It's just black. And obviously, like, the box art for that game is what people love about it. So if I could get that somehow, that would mean a lot to work on this project, and it would make me really, really happy. And again, I'm remembering as I'm going on this rant, this is a Victorious video, but... So basically, once again, I know that it's annoying that I'm talking about this in the middle of a Victorious video, but it's kind of my way to alleviate stress from the stupidity of this whole saga. And it's also my way of saying, hey, I got this other stuff that I'm trying to build up in the background, and I'm looking for this stuff because it'll help me out with these videos, and it'll give me dopamine if I can get some of this fun stuff. And I've had this thought in the back of my head this whole time, like, so many people are watching these videos for a reason I can't understand, and somewhere out there, there's someone who, like, has this thing I'm looking for and is maybe willing to sell it to me or to give it to me as a gift. I mean, if you've got, you know, the Sonic and Garfield pack, or if you got a weird Garfield knockoff, or if you got the Spirit of 76 statue or whatever, just hit me an email at contactquintonreviews@gmail.com. Remember to look up how to spell my first name, and we'll see if we can make something work. I would really appreciate it if you guys help me out with that voyage. What I've loved about researching Garfield video games as a topic is that it's given me a chance to look into a certain subgenre of video games which people don't take seriously unless they don't research, they don't talk about, and that is disposable gaming. Gaming which was meant to be enjoyed, played for a second, and then almost instantly forgotten and disposed of. And that is a category of gaming which defines 2010's Nickelodeon TV shows. Many of you guys will remember that in my last two videos I wanted to do a segment reviewing iCarly video games, but I couldn't find the time and I couldn't make it work thematically. Well, I've got news, people. With Victorious, I found the time and I've decided it's definitely, hopefully, going to work out thematically. Yes, our second Victorious intermission is going to be dedicated entirely, ignoring the Garfield stuff, to the topic of Victorious video games. We have a surprisingly high amount of ground to cover here. So without further ado, let's get this ball rolling. So when discussing Nickelodeon video games around the beginning of the 2010s, one thing very tempting to skip over is video games that were hosted exclusively online, whether that be on Nick.com or the individual websites for some of these different shows. But in my eyes, these games were often the most important because they were the easiest to access and often some of my personal favorites. As we've established, Victorious heavily featured the use of an in-universe website known as the Slap.com. And apparently there are video game developers who go to this school, because whenever the site is open up on screen, you can very clearly make out what seems to be a Games tab. And that Games tab existed in the real world as well, and was one of the biggest draws of the site. Now, online right now, you can find this thing called Flashpoint, which is a community-run software dedicated to archiving Flash games in a playable format. But for some odd reason, while iCarly and Garfield have basically been 100% archived by this team, Victorious hasn't been so lucky, as only a handful of titles and oddities have made it onto the freeware. So I'm going to be relying partially on fan-made run-throughs and that sort of thing, and if I can't find out a lot about a game, I'm going to tell you guys flat out. But with that, let's go ahead and cover every Victorious browser game to ever exist. Starting us off is Andre's Date Defense, couldn't get this one to work. Next is Beck and Jade's RV Racer, couldn't get this one to work either. Then we have Beck Escapes Hollywood Hotties, nope, this one doesn't work. Alright, yeah, you may be stunned to get the picture. 90% of the games on this site do not exist anymore. They are hosted on shady gaming websites that basically steal and republish games, but they still need Flash to function and thus do not work. Clearly, someone has the capabilities of making these games playable, but that person is not me. But in a way, I feel like that Flash games can be so basic that sometimes the titles alone can be the most entertaining aspect. Jade's Prom Wrecker, Kwaku's Sushi Tower, Sinjin's Locker Game, Tori's Mustache Bash, Wanko's Warehouse Stacker. So yeah, at this point I'm gonna go through all of the games which have been archived or have YouTube walkthroughs from back in the day, because going through the numerous games which have no visual evidence whatsoever would be just kind of boring. Starting us off is The Slap Cookie Rap. This game is pretty simple. We're playing Cat and we have to make cookies for the school's yearly showcase. Because of course, when you're having a showcase of the biggest talent at Hollywood Arts, have Ariana Grande do the catering. Cat will become easily confused, so you have to help her make orders. Now, personally, I was never good at this when this was my job, so it took me a few tries to get this game right. Every time you finish a section, you unlock a new option in the recipe board, and of course you have to get it all perfect, lest some kid's mom have a mental breakdown because you got her a white plate instead of a red one. In the bad ending, Kat says that she's more confused than before, and in the good ending, she gives you a kiss for helping out. One odd thing which is archived on Flashpoint is a personality test which would define which character in the show you were most like. And I figured, while this isn't really a game, it might be fun to play real quick and see which Hollywood Arts kid I really am. You forgot to do your homework and Psychowitz pulls a pop quiz. What do you do? Well, Psychowitz teaches a theater class, so I guess just do Panto or some shit and hope he grades on participation. Which adjective describes you? This one's hard. I can't be serious because I'm a YouTuber, I can't be genuine because I'm a YouTuber, and I can't be colorful because I'm white. I guess I'm misunderstood. Boy, I just realized that the mouse cursor on this screen recording is way off from where it really is, and I don't know why. Okay, so I got Robbie, but then I went back and changed all my answers until I got Andre, which I think is a real Robbie move. Cat's Alien Wipeout and Cat's Winter Alien Wipeout are two puzzle games released to the website. They're pretty simple and have nothing to do with the show, the kind of thing you'd find on the Apple Store in the first few years of that being a big thing. Cat is having a nightmare where aliens are attacking her favorite animals, pigs in the original and penguins in the Winter remake. You have to destroy all of the aliens without harming a single innocent cat-favored critter. That's the game. Skate with Cat is another winter game, which is once again pretty simple. You skate around as Cat, picking up candy canes, boots, and coffee, and all while avoiding elves and penguins who will do you damage. So penguins are bad guys now, that's inconsistent. I'm pretty confident that the plot of this game is that Cat is stealing from the North Pole. Think about it, you're picking up iconic things from Christmas, but running into Christmas authority figures deals you damage. Anyways, I played this one for way too long. I really didn't need to. There were two games from theslap.com which do not have a functioning archive that I was able to find YouTube Let's Plays for. The first is Rex's Dunk for a Buck. The game stars Rex, who you would control to try and knock the regular cast into a dunk dunking pit. Pretty simple stuff, as the walkthrough guide angrily notes in the video.
That was the whole game. That was the whole game.
The second is Locked Up, and is basically an explanation of how Tori and the gang escaped from prison at the end of the Season 2 Yerba episode. And yeah, it turns out Tori is just straight up Batman. That's how she got out. Don't know why she was afraid of doing that stunt fall, but isn't afraid of parkouring from one rooftop to the next without thought. But hey, at least now I got a pretty good idea of what happened to those boys at Alcatraz. I think they walked into a squid and then died instantly. Our final game is a unique one, as it actually comes from near the end of Victorious' shelf life. I'm talking about Nickelodeon Block Party, once hosted on Nick.com. You can probably guess what this is without even seeing footage of it. It's Mario Party, but with Nickelodeon characters, and played on a browser instead of with Bowser. The game is a pretty interesting relic of its time. If this had come out in 2007, it would have been released on console. If it came out today, it would be released on console, but this was put out at just the perfect time where that didn't make sense, and so it was exclusively a browser game. It's pretty simple stuff. You pick a character you want to play, 2 characters you want to play against, and then pick a board from a specific show that you want to play on. There, you run into characters, play mini games, gain or lose coins. Again, it's nothing original. I find this game fascinating because it's so easy to forget this awkward middle child era of Nickelodeon synergy. Oh boy, when I think of Nickelodeon, I think of the Penguins of Madagascar, I think of Fanboy and Chum Chum, I think of Planet Sheen, I think of Tough, Poppy, truly the greatest lineup of shows to ever hit the network. So yeah, obviously I played as Victoria Justice, and I picked the Victorious level, and I played it out just to see how it would go. You know, I've always wondered, if Beck from Victorious and Fanboy from Fanboy and Chum Chum met, what would they say to each other? Huh. This is a really weird game to play with the live action choices, because while the 2D and 3D characters are one-to-one with the art style you would see in the TV show, with the live action stuff like this, it's like, yep, that's definitely a girl. Good work, game developers. With all that out of the way, it's time to move on to the actual topic that probably got you at home excited to hear about this segment of the video, and that is Victorious console releases. As we've discussed many times, one of the defining aspects of Victorious is that it's supposed to be fantasy material, making you wish that you went to a school like Hollywood Arts. And the main purpose of these 3 main Victorious releases, each game different from the other, and each game released on a different console, was to give you a chance to explore that fantasy. In other words, what we're talking about with these games are Victorious-themed RPGs. And we are going to start things off with the canonical first game in the trilogy, Hollywood Arts' debut for the Nintendo DS. And it's really cool that the first game we're talking about is for the Nintendo DS, because there's one other thing that I was saving to talk about until we got around to this segment. And that is the official Nintendo DS gaming accessory kit themed around Victorious. See, this is what I'm talking about. We got the props. You're tuned into the fucking story. Okay, so as we've set up, the first game we're going to play is 2011's Hollywood Arts debut. This is a very interesting game to play for a series of reasons that we're about to obviously get into. The game starts with a character creation screen, and while we're a girl by default, we can change to a guy with a simple click of a button. Take that, Netflix comedians! Other than gender, you can swap the hair and skin color, but the only other option at this point is stretching or skewing the character's body shape. Once I made my guy as stretched out as possible, I started my adventure. We begin the game with Tori approaching us in the halls, as she welcomes us to Hollywood Arts. She tells us that the school consists of a lot of friendly, talented people, except for one person, Jade, who approaches and we talk to after Tori leaves. Took you long enough. Okay, first mistake, why were you talking to Tori? I'm the only one worth talking to in this school. And my boyfriend, but you can't talk to him. Jay tells us that it's time for Mr. Szykowicz's class, but that there's a tradition that people who are new must wear silly outfits the first time they go to class. We find a wig in the Black Box Theater and head to class, where Mr. Sykowicz gives us a star for dressing up so fancy. Jade erupts, revealing that she was trying to play a prank on us, but as Tori notes, it apparently backfired. Sykowicz then challenges us to a breakdancing competition. After this, Tori suggests we go over and decorate our locker, like she had to way back in episode 2. And I think I know just what I want to do. A little bit of this, a little of that, here and there we go, Van Gogh's Starry Night. And now, as a special bonus, I'm gonna draw a gigantic Garfield attacking the town. And he has a big spliff, and that is where the smoke is coming from. And there, perfection. Now that we've finished chapter 1 of the game, let's move on to episode 2, the bird scene. Tori approaches us and says that she's doing a play called Moonlight Magic and wants us to audition. However, Sykowicz butts in and reminds Tori that before we can take part in any school play, we have to pass the bird scene. Tori tries to help us prepare, but is obviously banned from giving us too many clues, and there are several things blocking our path forward. Tori tells us that Kat will be able to make us a perfect costume, maintaining continuity to Season 2. However, Kat is currently handcuffed to a railing in the hallway, something that Tori actually did in Season 1, although she insists that it wasn't her this time. She notes that Kat looks like she needs to go to the bathroom, so we'd better free her fast. In order to free Kat, we have to go talk to Festus, the owner of the school food truck who has a pair of cutters. However, in exchange, we have to look over his food truck and serve students coming to eat there. And so starts our second mini-game. It's a little hectic, but you get the hang of it. You turn these little knobs to prepare a certain kind of food, and then you make people's orders and then send them out. For instance, here Robbie wants a taco, Kat wants a burger, St. John wants to... So wait, Kat? Kat? What the fuck are you doing here? Where are you going? Get your skinny ass back here! So yeah, we finish the minigame, Festus gives us the cutters, and we free Kat, who promises to make us the best possible bird scene costume before she runs away. We then have to get Andre to perform a song with us, because the bird scene requires a pop song, apparently. Now, I want to lift the curtain really briefly to just explain something to you guys. I couldn't find a DS with a capture card for this project, so I'm recording this video with an emulator. But the thing is, this title is based entirely in minigames designed for the DS stylus. So when you play these games with a computer mouse, it's fucking impossible. So I spent this entire run through just royally failing to perform in the slightest. And it's actually kind of surreal to have the tables turned on me so quickly. Now I'm on stage struggling to perform a song, and Victoria Justice is looming over my shoulder giving sarcastic commentary about how I suck.
Oh no! Yeesh!
After this, we meet back up with Tori, who has brought in a bird for us to train to do the scene with us. And suddenly, the gameplay completely changes. We are now playing as the bird, as we see ourselves training the bird by teaching it breakdancing moves.
Oh no!
We do the play and Sykowicz says he hated it and asks us if we agree. If you select no, you obviously win the mission, as anyone who has seen the show would probably anticipate. Now, so far this game has done a phenomenal job of replicating memorable moments from the show without necessarily overwriting them. However, from here, the game suddenly pivots direction. Starting with episode 3 and through episode 10, every single level is an adaptation of a specific TV story. mimicking the beats of specific Season 1 and 2 episodes so closely that the game cannot coexist in the same universe. However, what's interesting about these levels is how they diverge from the main timeline in interesting ways. There are two main limitations to this game. Firstly, the developers created perfect replications of several sets from the show, but only those at the school. So places like Tori's living room or Psychowitz's house are totally off limits. Second, you are intended to be the main character of this game. And because you weren't in the original episodes in question, accommodations have to be made. Very often, characters will approach you and begin describing B-plots of certain episodes which don't happen at the school and thus take place off-screen. It starts to give the game a kind of surreal energy, like you're a time traveler who knows about all of these events and is trying to pick up on context clues for where you've landed in history. Hey, you guys hear about that Zodiac killer? For instance, episode 4 is based on the Birth Week episode, but because the Birth Week episode is mostly set in Tori's house and in a recording studio, most of the level is Tori in a hallway describing the episode to you. Trina then approaches you and asks you to help design the cover to her debut album. Oh boy, I think I know what I'm gonna draw. And done. Episode 5 is based on Jade Dumps Back, and is perhaps one of the more interesting in terms of changes because it adds an entire B-plot to the story just to make the gameplay work a little bit more. In the story, like the episode, Jade has broken up with Beck over a disagreement. But in the game, Beck has since gone missing. As Trina approaches, we find out why. Beck is considered one of the most connected students at Hollywood Arts, and Trina believes that if she becomes his girlfriend, he can help her get a role in the new Resident Evil movie. After Trina leaves, Beck reveals that he's been hiding from Trina in a large cardboard box, and comes out to talk to you. The entire point of adding this to the game is giving you something to do in an episode that you were never supposed to be in. Throughout the level, Beck has you run errands and do petty tasks for him, all while you overhear snippets of the main plot happening in the sidelines. Throughout the rest of the game, you do such things as perform as a backup dancer for Tori's songs, play an instrument in Andre's songs, clean up a room that Jade feels too lazy to do herself, and dress up a set so Tori can perform scenes on stage. All in between running errands for the main characters to try and ease along storylines going on in their personal lives. Partway through the tedious list of all the things I was doing for these people I barely know, it suddenly struck me. I'm not the 9th member of this friend group. I'm the 2nd Sinjin. Throughout this run-through, I kept trying to change my costume to make my character look more like an asshole, but I eventually realized that the furthest I could possibly get was Sharpay's brother. Episode 7 is based on Roborazzi and is overwhelmingly one of the most divergent stories. Instead of adapting the incredibly bonkers plot of that one, the level is actually a sequel to the episode, basically starting from where it ended and writing about 5 to 10 more minutes of material. At the beginning, the gang are discussing how Robbie has turned Roborazzi into a cooking show, and how he's quit his drama content because of the dirt that they have on him. Robbie then approaches Tori and says that he's actually gotten bored with cooking, and that he's decided to turn Roborazzi into a prank show. He then asks us to do a series of small favors for him, which are, in fact, setups for pranks. We firstly go to the lunch area, where we witness Kat and Sinjin breaking up after briefly getting together at the end of the original episode. Sinjin's credit card apparently is for emergencies only and can only be used with parental authorization. And Kat was only dating Sinjin to steal his credit card. We, I believe, record this conversation, and Robbie posts it online. We then hide a bunch of ketchup inside of Andre's locker, which I believe explodes, making a mess. Tori, Kat, and Andre immediately accept that we were tricked into doing these things, and they decide to tell on Robbie to her grandmother, which apparently does the job. One interesting B-plot the game invents is an extension of a running joke in one episode that Andre has never been stung by a bee before. In the original, it's just a joke they tell a few times, but in the game, there's a conclusion where we actually trick a swarm of bees into attacking Andre. The bees then begin attacking everyone, and we have to do a choreographed dance to slap them away. You'll remember the episode about Melinda Murray, the famous actress who gets Beck fired, who Tori puts in the hospital after trying to make things right. Well, the interesting thing is that in this game, you have a few different options as per how you want to try and make things right. But no matter what you pick, things end with Melinda going to the hospital. So at some point, that wasn't even Tori's fault. God made that decision. The final chapter based on a TV story is episode 11, I Scream, You Scream. In the story, Tori has been locked into a demeaning contract with her older sister, which she can only get out of if she gets a pop star to sing at her house. Luckily, an ice cream company has been running a competition where letters can be found at the bottom of different pints of ice cream. Whoever can spell the word scream wins a private concert with, quote, a huge surprise pop star. I wonder who it is. They begin going through ice cream, and at some point, Robbie says he's going to take the leftover stuff to a local playground to give to kids, as he did in the original episode. Robbie then runs back to the school as he was mistaken as a pedophile and chased there by a group of parents. He suggests that you dance to make the parents forget why they came there in the first place. Real quick, can you imagine if you were a parent and this happened to you? You chase someone who you think is a pedophile into a high school, and you stop a student there and say, hey, a pedophile just ran into your school, and their response to that is just... and somehow that makes you forget why you came there. The final episode is all about you preparing for the big showcase. You do a song, do a dance, get a really low score, but somehow get declared the breakout artist of the competition. As the credits roll below, a newspaper clipping is shown from Teenage Star magazine, which reads, TV Talent Show Celebrity, which is funny for many reasons, the biggest one being that this means that in this version of the canon, I became famous before anyone else in the cast. Hollywood looked at this lovable group of teens, and they said, hey, that guy. So we finished Hollywood Art's debut. Now let's move on to the second Victorious game, released on the exact same day. Victorious, Time to Shine for the Xbox 360 Kinect. Oh no!